إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا وحبيبنا مولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله. قال الله تعالى في كتاب الكريم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين لله شهداء بالقسط ولا يجرمنكم شنعان قوم على أن لا تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. صدق الله العظيم. فقال النبي الكريم صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فلا يؤذي جاره ومن كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليكرم ضيفه ومن كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليقل خيرا أو ليصمت أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. أما بعد. Throughout time and throughout history, there have always been people of wealth. People not just of wealth, I should say, but rather people of extravagant, extraordinary, great wealth. In previous times, we know their names from even 1,000 or plus years ago. There are people that were kings like the pharaohs, like the Caesar, or even like a more recent one who was under the banner of Islam, Mansa Musa, rahimahullah. Others were businessmen, people who worked and built their empires. And we know them like Abdurrahman ibn Auf, radiallahu anh, the great companion of the Prophet ﷺ, whose fortune at his death, if you calculated today, would be in the hundreds of billions of dollars for the gold that he had. But in particular, there is one individual that, as we close this month of Quran, it's important for us to look at his story because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions him by name in the Quran. And He tells us his story in the Quran. And that is Qarun. This man, Qarun, Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, the cousin of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in his tafsir he says that Qarun was the cousin of Musa alayhi salam. He had a familial connection to Musa alayhi salam. And he also was of Banu Israel. He was an individual who actually was from Musa alayhi salam's people. And yet, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Fir'aun, He says Fir'aun wa Haman wa Qarun, lumping in someone who should have been of the oppressed people, but instead Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lumps him in as one of the oppressors. This man, some of the scholars say, Al-Qatada mentions that he was called An-Nur. He was called the light because of how beautifully he could recite the Torah. And therefore he had a reputation for that. But what happened to him is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about. Inna Qarun kana min qawmi Musa fabagha alayhim, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. Qarun was from the people of Musa alayhi salam. He was someone who should have been a believer. فَبَغَى عَلَيْهِمْ. However, what did he do? He transgressed against him. وَآتَيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْكُنُوزِ مَا إِنَّ مَفَاتِحَهُ لَتَنُوءُ بِالْعُصْبَةِ أُولِي الْقُوَّةِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I gave him such wealth that in order to access it, he needed several people to carry the keys to his treasure. Just the keys. People of great strength. إِذْ قَالَ لَهُ قَوْمُهُ لَا تَفْرَحْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ الْفَرِحِينَ. His people tried to warn him. He said, don't do this. Don't be so extravagant. Don't show off so much. Don't let people see this and think, talk about how great you are because of your wealth. وَابْتَغِي فِي مَا آتَاكَ اللَّهُ الدَّارُ الْآخِرَةِ. ولا تنسى, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues, ولا تنسى نصيبك من الدنيا وأحسن كما أحسن الله إليك ولا تبغي الفساد في الأرض إن الله لا يحب المفسدين. His people continue giving him this message that be mindful of the next life. Think about what it is that you're working towards. Don't forget what you have to do in this world to earn the next life. They try to advise him sincerely. They try to give him this nasiha. But what is his response? قال إنما أوتيته على علم عندي. I earned what I earned. What I have is because of what I know, because of what I did. This is mine. That was his response. أولم يعلم أن الله قد أهلك من قبله من القرون من هو أشد منه قوة وأكثر جمعا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds to his statement. Don't you know that Allah has destroyed people who were far wealthier than you, Qarun? People who had far more wealth and far more of an army or far more of a group to defend them. You think you're special, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to him, but you're not. You are not that special. فَخَرَجَ عَلَىٰ قَوْمِهِ فِي زِينَتِهِ. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about a particular incident. He comes out to his people in his best, most extravagant clothes. Before I continue, brothers, please scoot up, fill in gaps in front of you. Any space you see, fill in front of you. Inshallah, there's going to be quite a few people. Inshallah, fill in front. And when he comes out in his regal, the people are watching him. And in particular, there are some who have become so focused on becoming like Qarun, being someone like him, trying to become wealthy, trying to become people of means. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قَالَ الَّذِينَ يُرِيدُونَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا يَا لَيْتَ لَنَا مِثْلَ مَا أُوتِيَ قَارُونَ إِنَّهُ لَذُو حَظٍّ عَظِيمٍ. People watching him say, man, I wish I could be like Qarun. I wish I could have what Qarun had. I wish I had what he had. I wish I could be like him, this person of great nobility and honor and wealth. I wish I had what he had. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقَالَ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمِ. However, those who had knowledge, who understood that this life is not something for us to just skate through. It's not the place for us to have eternal salvation. It is a place where we have a job to do. These people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَيْلَكُمْ ثَوَابُ اللَّهِ خَيْرٌ لِمَنْ آمَنَ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا وَلَا يُلَقَّاهَا إِلَّا الصَّابِرُونَ. They said to these individuals, are you not using your brain? Think. Look at what he's doing. Look at how he's living. Just because he has wealth doesn't mean that he's someone to emulate. Just because he has money in the bank doesn't mean that he's someone you want to be like. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has what is far better for you, far better for any person. That message is one, brothers and sisters, I think all of us hear still today. But there's always that creeping thought that comes in. And that thought is, but is it? Is it really? Is it that much better? I have what I have in front of me right now. I know that this is better. Am I trading in a bird in the hand for two in the bush? What makes more sense for me to follow? And this is where we have an unfortunate shortcoming. Not at an individual level, but as a community. That we have allowed ourselves to become people who don't truly study what it is that we believe. Think about any person. If you went to them, you said, what do you believe? If they said to you that I believe in evolution, that is my life path, that is what I accept. Well, you'd ask them to say, what is it about it that speaks to you? What is it about it that you really resonate with? What do you believe so strongly that it's what you follow entirely in your life? Now, if they start hemming and hawing, I think it just makes sense. I think it's just right. I think it's just good. What are you going to say? Okay, great. You're useless. You're not telling me anything of substance. You have nothing to offer me. You're just saying, oh, this is this and this is that without any substance. And today, I want you to think for yourself. When people have come to you to say, why are you fasting? Why are you making it so that you don't drink water all day? Why are you making it so that you don't eat anything all day? What is the response? Oh, because it teaches me to be empathetic to poor people. Does it? Sure. Is that the reason we do it? Not in the slightest. So what's the reason? Very simply, the reason is لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, Allah says. So that we can gain this God consciousness. Okay, well, you believe in fasting. Why do you believe in Islam? If your answer is just going to be, well, because I grew up in it, because it seems like it makes sense. What about it makes sense? One God? Well, there's other religions that believe in one God. What is it about Islam that is so important and so powerful? I think the Prophet was a good guy. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. If you hear this and you think to yourself, well, this sounds just as useless as the last person, you'd be right. What is our answer? What do we know about this deen? Not everybody needs to be a scholar, brothers and sisters. You don't need to stand up and go study for 7, 8, 9, 10 years and devote your life to Islam in that way. You don't need to do that. But is there at least a baseline understanding? Is there at least simple aqeedah that we understand? Is there at least simple fiqh that we understand? And is there at least a very simple worldview that we can tell people easily to help give da'wah? These are questions that we have to really ask, and they're not fun questions to answer sometimes. But if we're honest, the first step to solving any problem is admitting that there is one. Reflect on this as we think about these people who were watching Qarun. And think for yourself how often you sit thinking about those who have so much more than yourself. How much wealth they have and what you could do with it. The money, if only I got to this point, then I would do this. This is a very common refrain I hear. Young people especially. Well, I'm thinking I'll become a doctor first, and then I'll have lots of money, so then I'll be able to go and donate a lot. And I think that's how it makes sense for me to live. What is this? What kind of mindset is that? What kind of thought process is that? Especially because if you know the basic fundamentals of our deen, we know that your rizq is promised to you. So whether you're a doctor, you're a carpenter, you're an electrician, what you get in this life is already set. It's not that you don't need to try, because if you don't try, you probably won't get anything. But that was part of what was set for you. That's the simple logic behind it. But if we let this be our guiding principle, then we are like these people who were watching Qarun and saying, man, I wish I had what Qarun had. I wish I could be like Qarun. I would do so much good with it. No. Because people like Qarun, most of them go astray. Most of them get caught up in their wealth. And they allow it to divert, to corrupt their minds. It continues, brothers and sisters, because then with this story, فخسفنا به وبدار الأرض فما كان له من فئة ينصرونه من دون الله وما كان من المنتصرين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us exactly what Qarun's final destination was. Now, think about this, honestly, because to me it's always been something scary. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we had the earth swallow Qarun and all of his treasure. I remember reading a few years ago about a sinkhole that opened up underneath a man's bedroom. And this was in Florida, if believe it or not. The authorities came because there was a question, is this man okay? Is he alive? We haven't seen him in a long time. The authorities came, and when they came to the house, they saw in his bedroom that a sinkhole had opened up and there was no trace of him. He was gone. And I always think about that when I think about Qarun. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَخَسَفْنَا بِهِ. We swallowed, the earth swallowed him up. It took him in. Imagine having such an ending. And the thing is that we might think to ourselves, well, good thing I don't have as much wealth as Qarun. Good thing I'm not that rich. But I want to ask you a question. And I want you to be sincere in your own internal answer. Would you rather have significant wealth like Qarun in a time when he lived? Or would you rather have air conditioning? Would you rather have significant wealth like Qarun, people who can blow fans on you with large palm leaves? Or would you rather have a cell phone? Would you rather have a home with indoor plumbing? What would you rather have? The reality is, brothers and sisters, people today who live in our times, their baseline standard of living is better in some respects than even Qarun had. A man who was amongst the wealthiest to ever live. And yet, what did it do for him? It didn't give him any of the pleasures that we have today, any of the nice things, the comforts. Brothers, scoot up, please. Fill in every gap. I said there's a lot of people still coming. I need to see movement. Any gap you see in front of you, fill in, please. Please. If you're along the back line, please scoot forward. Inshallah, I know it's comfortable to lean against it, but there needs to be room. Still gaps. Fill in, inshallah. We all, brothers and sisters, live in a time where the baseline of our wealth is arguably better than some of the richest people in history. We have so much. And it's become to such a point that we have so much that even the poor people who beg, if you offer them food, they don't want food. I have food. I need other things. This is the time that we live in. And if the results for Qarun were such that people looked at him and saw his wealth and felt that tinge of misguidance, and he himself was misguided because of it, well, what does it say for us if we live in a time, in an era where the wealth that we have, even though it may not be as significant, could arguably be considered better? It's a scary question. بإذن ta'ala we'll discuss more in the second khutbah. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فأستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. What wealth often creates, it is not the wealth itself that is a problem. It is unfortunately the mindset that it builds. It builds a mindset of entitlement. That I deserve what I have. These are in fact the words of Qarun. إِنَّمَا أُوتِيتُهُ عَلَىٰ عِلْمٍ عِنْدِي. I did this. This is because of me. I worked hard for this. This was Qarun's refrain. But this entitlement, brothers and sisters, it is not in line with the very basic reality of the Sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ was the most honored individual to ever walk on this earth. He was the beloved of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was and is. And yet, did he ever act entitled? Did he ever act like someone who was better than other people? Did he ever speak down to individuals? If anybody had a right to be entitled, it was him. But all we know of him is that he spoke to people with kindness. That he was the most humble. He was the most present and the most considerate of those around him. There's a beautiful narration of his young grandson, Hussein radiallahu anh, that when they're in a gathering, the Sahaba, there were senior companions present in this gathering, And Hussein radiallahu anh pipes up to speak. And he starts speaking, but he has a stutter. And he's kind of having trouble getting through it. Companions are feeling a little weirded out. It's a little awkward. This kid can't finish what he's saying. He's stopping, going, stop. And they look at the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ is just focused entirely on him. Just listening to him. And finally, when Hussein radiallahu anh, this little boy, finishes speaking in this gathering, the Prophet ﷺ smiles and he said, لَقَدْ وَرَثَهَا عَنْ عَمِّهِ مُوسَى. This stutter that he has, he inherited this from his uncle, Musa alayhi salam. Right? This is a child. And the Prophet ﷺ was giving him that level of attention, that level of love and care. Now, reflect on this idea that if the Prophet ﷺ could do this, that he could look at his young grandson and say, I will give you everything that I have in this moment. How can we say that we cannot? How can we allow ourselves to be people who think, no, my time is worth more than this person, this child, this other person, this individual? This mindset, brothers and sisters, this is not in line with the Sunnah. It is a mindset of entitlement. And if we have entitlement, then we are in line with the Sunnah, not of the Prophet ﷺ, but with Qarun. I leave you today with three things, brothers and sisters. Remember first that the Prophet ﷺ, in spite of his authority, he never abused it. There's a beautiful narration that at the time after the battle of Badr, when they had captives, the Prophet ﷺ's son-in-law, the husband of his daughter Zainab, he was not yet Muslim. He had been captured. And Zainab radiallahu anha heard that he had been captured. She sent a ransom on his behalf. It was the necklace of her mother, Khadija radiallahu anha. When the Prophet ﷺ saw it, he began to cry because he remembered Khadija radiallahu anha through it. And he cried. And he came to his companions who were holding the captives. And he said, would you please give me permission to let him go? And I'll pay the ransom on his behalf. The companion said, what are you talking about? Why are you asking us? Why are you asking us? You're the Prophet, you say so. He said, I put you in charge of this. And I don't want to abuse my position. Sallallahu alayhi wa. Think about that. Entitlement is, hey, let him go. I got a necklace, it's fine, let it go. I said so, that's why. The Prophet ﷺ, the Sunnah is, would you mind if I did this, please? That's beauty. That's character. Number two, we cannot be entitled people. Brothers and sisters, I say this, and it's important for you to recognize, this is not some abstract concept. When you're told to do something by someone who's volunteering for parking, you have to do it. I'm too good, I'm not going to listen to him, I'm going to do what I want. That's entitlement. When you stand up, when they're making announcements after the salah, you stand up, I have to pray my sunnah, I'm not going to listen to this person. That's entitlement. You think you're better than the person who's speaking, so you're not going to give them attention. If you are being addressed by an elder, if you are being addressed by a king, by someone who's a president or leader of state, would you do that? Oh, let me just start praying in front of him. No. You would give them respect and honor, but your community member, someone who puts in time and effort and energy to serve your community, to serve your masjid, you're going to say, no, I'm not going to listen to this person. How is that appropriate? That is entitlement at its core. Getting on your phone during the khutbah. Oh, I don't need to listen to this, I'm good. Entitlement, brothers and sisters. This is not a mindset of the Sunnah. And remember lastly that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not love those who have entitlement. Qarun was one of them. And he asks those people who think to themselves, who say, the fire will only touch us for a day or two, we're safe from it otherwise. He asks a simple question. When did you get this promise from me? When did I say this would happen? You think you deserve this, you don't. I never said you would have this. That entitlement cannot run in anything, brothers and sisters. Don't think that this, I'll do it next Ramadan. Who says there's a next Ramadan? Don't think to yourself, I'm going to do this action or that action. I'll come to the masjid when I'm older. Who says there's an older? You think you have it. That's entitlement. And we do not want to be entitled people. As this Ramadan finishes, brothers and sisters, don't let it pass without taking advantage and not being people who think we're entitled to Ramadan as if it should always come. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us for our shortcomings. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to open all of our hearts. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from mindlessness. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد كما صليت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى محمد كما باركت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا ظلمنا انفسنا وان لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. ربنا تقبل منا انك انت السميع العليم وتوب علينا يا مولانا انك انت التواب الرحيم. عباد الله ان الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اذكروا الله العظيم يذكركم واشكروا يزدكم واستغفروا يغفر لكم واتقوا يجعل لكم من أمركم مخرجا. أقيم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. هيا على الصلاة هيا على الفلاح. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
استووا استقيموا اعتدلوا وتراصوا وسدوا الخلل. الله أكبر. الحمد لله.